Welcome to the Doctrine Deep Dive. We are so glad you are joining us today for this one because, well, usually when we talk about a military deployment or a conflict, there is this expectation of precision.
Yeah, absolute clarity, like a light switch.
Exactly, like a light switch. It is either off, which is peace, or it is firmly flipped on, which means war.
Right.
The borders are clear, the uniforms are distinct, and, the evening news can just point to a map and say, here's the front line, here are the good guys, there are the bad guys, and they are fighting over this specific piece of land.
And that binary model is, it is deeply comforting to the public. It used to be deeply comforting to military planners, too.
Oh, for sure.
Because a switch is something you can control, right? You can measure it, you mobilize, you fight, you sign a treaty, you go home.
We really like things to be neatly categorized into before the war, during the war, and after the war. We want a parade at the end.
Yeah, everyone wants the parade.
But the reality, especially over, the last few decades, is that the switch is completely broken. Or rather, I guess it was never a switch to begin with.
No, it really wasn't.
When you step into the world of modern global strategy, that neat binary landscape just dissolves. We are looking at a strategic environment that is entirely murky, where adversaries are competing fiercely without ever declaring war.
Yeah, and if you are relying on that light switch to tell you whether you are secure or in danger, you are going to be caught completely off guard.
Definitely.
Our adversaries recognized a long time ago that confronting the United States military in a conventional force-on-force war,
Yeah.
Flipping that switch all the way on is basically suicidal.
Right, they know they cannot win that.
Exactly. So they found the gray areas, they found the dim light. They operate in the shadows where the rules of traditional warfare just do not apply.
So if the switch is broken and the front lines are invisible, how does the military actually operate in the dark? That is our mission today.
It's a big mission.
It is. We are going to unpack the incredibly complex, often invisible strategies the United States military uses to shape the global environment. We are talking about them. Let us start with this concept of the competition continuum from the understanding irregular warfare source, because this completely replaces the idea of simply being at peace.
Yeah, it throws peace right out the window.
How does the doctrine describe this new reality?
Well, the doctrine strips away the illusion of absolute peace. It states very clearly that the world is in a state of enduring, persistent competition.
Like constantly.
Constantly. State actors, non-state actors, insurgencies, transnational criminal organizations, everyone is constantly jostling for influence, power, and security.
So it is never just quiet.
Never. The competition continuum replaces the binary switch with a complex spectrum. It describes a world where the United States and its partners are constantly interacting with others through a mixture of three main areas, right?
Here, what are those?
You have cooperation, competition below armed conflict, and armed conflict.
Let us examine that competition below armed conflict piece, because if we assume these three areas are not just a linear pathway where you cooperate, then things get tense so you compete, and then negotiations fail so you shoot, how do they actually overlap?
You really have to look at how nations interact in the real world today. These states of being are entirely simultaneous.
Wait, simultaneous?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The United States might be cooperating with another major global power on, say, space exploration or maritime navigation treaty.
Okay, so shaking hands on one thing.
Exactly. But at the exact same time, that rival power might be using proxy cyber groups to probe our financial infrastructure or using economic coercion to bully a small partner nation in the Pacific.
Wow, okay.
That is competition below the threshold of armed conflict. The goal is to achieve strategic objectives without triggering a conventional military response.
It's like a massive multidimensional chessboard.
That is a great way to put it.
But if we are not primarily shooting at each other, and we are not trying to conquer territory in the traditional sense, what exactly is the prize? What is the currency of this competition?
Well, the texts define the ultimate prize as the competition for sovereignty. And this requires a profoundly human-centric perspective.
How so?
Governments, insurgents, and non-state entities are all constantly vying for legitimacy in the eyes of the populations they want to control or influence.
So it is about winning over the people.
Exactly. And the doctrine breaks this down to two very distinct types of legitimacy: existential legitimacy and functional legitimacy.
Let us break those two concepts down, because understanding the difference between them changes how you interpret almost every single global conflict you see on the news.
Oh, it really does. So existential legitimacy, which is sometimes called external legitimacy, is basically the formal stamp of approval from the international community.
Like being officially recognized.
Right. It means your country is recognized on a map. You have a seat at the United Nations. You can sign international treaties and, foreign ambassadors present their credentials to your head of state.
It is the legal definition of being a recognized government.
Precisely.
It is the piece of paper that says you are the legitimate authority. But, you can have that piece of paper and still have absolutely no control over your own country, which is where functional legitimacy comes in, right?
You hit the nail on the head. Functional legitimacy is entirely internal. It is granted solely by the population.
So it is about what the people actually think.
Exactly. It exists only when the local population actually trusts the government to provide the basic necessities of a functioning society.
Things like what?
Things like the provision of safety, security, essential services, dispute resolution, and good governance. A government can have all the existential legitimacy in the world. I mean, every other nation might recognize them, but if they lack functional legitimacy, they're just a hollow shell.
To make this incredibly tangible, think about a local mayor in a medium-sized city.
Okay, I like this analogy.
So, the mayor has existential legitimacy the second they take the oath of office, right? They have the title, the corner office, the official seal on the podium.
Right, everyone agrees they are the mayor.
Yes.
Yeah.
The state and federal governments recognize them as the mayor. But let us say that city experiences a massive snowstorm.
Uh-oh.
If the mayor cannot get the snowplows out, if the power grid fails and people are freezing in their homes, if the police force is so corrupt that people are afraid to call for help when there is a break-in,
Then they have a huge problem.
Exactly. The people living in that city do not care about the official seal on the podium at that point. The mayor has completely lost functional legitimacy.
That is spot on. And, in a stable democracy, the consequence of losing that functional legitimacy is relatively peaceful, right?
Yeah, the mayor just gets voted out in the next election.
Exactly. But the environments described in the Understanding Irregular Warfare Handbook are fragile, volatile states.
So the consequences are much worse.
So much worse. The consequences of a national government losing functional legitimacy are immediate and often violently destructive.
Because the moment the government fails to provide those services, they create a vacuum.
A massive vacuum.
If a village in a remote province has no reliable drinking water and the national government has ignored their pleas for 5 years, they are desperate.
They're looking for anyone to help.
Right. So if an armed insurgent group rolls into that village, drills a well, provides reliable water, and sets up a patrol to keep bandits away, who does that village actually answer to?
Well, the answer to the insurgents.
Exactly.
The insurgent group has effectively stolen the functional legitimacy from the state.
Mm.
They will say to the population, hey, the central government in the capital does not care about you. They cannot protect you, but we can.
We are here right now.
Right. They will point out, their courts take 10 years to settle a land dispute and require bribes, but our shadow court will settle it fairly by tomorrow afternoon.
They cannot feed you, but we have grain.
Exactly. The currency of irregular warfare in this environment is not the caliber of your rifle. It is trust. It is reliable electricity. It is a fair, predictable justice system.
That reframes the entire concept of defeating an insurgency.
It really does.
If the root cause of the insurgency is that the central government fundamentally lacks functional legitimacy, you cannot bomb your way to a solution.
No, you really cannot. You could send in a conventional military force and eliminate every single insurgent fighter in that province.
And claim a victory.
Tactically, yes, you have achieved a victory. But strategically, you have changed absolutely nothing.
Because the underlying problems are still there.
Exactly. If the government still fails to pick up the trash, still fails to provide drinking water, and still runs a corrupt police force, a new insurgent group will simply rise up to take the place of the old one.
The cycle just repeats itself.
Because the population's fundamental grievances have not been addressed. The military cannot solve political marginalization or severe economic deprivation purely with lethal force.
So what can they do?
They have to find ways to help the host government build its own functional legitimacy.
Which brings us to a massive logistical and strategic dilemma for the United States.
Huge one.
To win this competition for sovereignty on a global scale against rival global powers who are also trying to exert influence the United States military cannot be everywhere at once.
No, we simply do not have the resources.
We do not have the manpower, the budget, or the political will to fix every pothole, drill every well, and secure every village in every fragile nation on Earth.
And importantly, The authors of this doctrine recognize that limitation explicitly. The United States cannot maintain a massive footprint in every single contested region.
So what is the alternative?
Therefore, the strategic approach is not to do everything ourselves, but to build a vast, interconnected network of highly capable friends.
Oh.
We have to empower partner nations to secure their own borders, defeat their own internal threats, and maintain their own functional legitimacy.
Let us examine exactly how we build that network, pulling heavily from Joint Publication 320 and the Doctrine of Security Cooperation.
This is a huge piece of the puzzle.
It is a massive piece of the global strategy that rarely makes the evening news. How does the Department of Defense actually define security cooperation?
Well, it is an overarching umbrella term that encompasses all Department of Defense interactions with foreign security establishments.
All interactions.
Yes, every single time the United States military engages with another country's military or security forces, whether it is a high-level strategic summit, a joint training exercise, or a specialized advising mission, it falls under the authorities and framework of security cooperation.
That is broad, because we often just see the polished side of this on the news. Right?
Yeah, the photo ops.
Exactly. Two navies sailing perfectly aligned in the ocean for a photo opportunity, or paratroopers from different nations jumping out of the same plane during an exercise. But the doctrine outlines three very specific, pragmatic goals for these interactions.
It does. The goals are to build relationships that promote United States interests, to develop allied and partner nation military capabilities for their own self-defense, and to secure peacetime and contingency access for United States forces.
I really want to focus on that word, access.
It is a critical word.
Because securing access sounds like we just want permission to park our jets on their runway. But in the context of the competition continuum, access is a weapon all its own, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about the massive logistics of moving military assets across the globe.
It is a nightmare, I'm sure.
It is. By building a deep, trusting relationship with a partner nation over a decade, the United States might negotiate the right to use a deep-water port to refuel naval vessels.
Which saves a ton of time and resources.
Exactly. We might secure airspace rights to fly heavy cargo planes over their territory during an emerging crisis in a neighboring region. We might even pre-position massive stockpiles of medical supplies, fuel, and ammunition on their soil in secure warehouses.
So when a crisis actually erupts, we are not scrambling to ship supplies across an entire ocean.
Right, the logistics are already in place.
Yeah.
And that creates an insurmountable dilemma for our adversaries.
How so?
Well, if a rival nation knows that the United States already has the logistical network, the basing rights, and the diplomatic clearance to respond to a regional crisis in 48 hours, that rival is far less likely to try something aggressive.
Because we can react too fast.
Yes, the access itself serves as a massive deterrent. We are shaping the environment to limit the adversary's options.
Okay, so that covers the strategic footprint side of things. But the second goal is developing the capabilities of the partner nation.
Right, building them up.
The texts refer to this as security force assistance. And, if you are just casually reading the news, security force assistance usually sounds like the United States flying a massive cargo plane full of night vision goggles and rifles to an allied country, dropping off the crates on the tarmac and saying, "Good luck out there."
Yeah, that is a huge misconception. Handing over physical equipment is the absolute smallest and often the least important fraction of security force assistance.
Really? The least important?
Absolutely. The doctrine clarifies that providing hardware without providing the architecture to support it is a complete waste of resources.
That makes sense.
Security force assistance involves deep structural advising. It's about organizing, training, equipping, rebuilding, and advising foreign security forces.
Let us get into the weeds of how that actually works, because the doctrine introduces a concept called institutional capacity building.
Oh, this is the really fascinating part.
It is! This is the part of the military that makes movies incredibly boring, but makes armies incredibly lethal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Institutional capacity building is basically the bureaucracy of war.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah. The United States is not just sending special operations forces to teach a foreign infantry battalion how to clear a room or shoot accurately.
So what else are we doing?
We are sending experts to work directly with the partner nations' defense ministries. We are training their supply chain managers. We are training their maintenance officers. We are training their human resources and payroll departments.
Wait. Human resources?
Yes, human resources.
The United States military is deploying personnel to teach another country how to process payroll. How does that possibly win the competition for sovereignty?
Okay, think about the hypothetical scenario we discussed earlier regarding functional legitimacy.
With the mayor in the snowstorm.
Similar concept, but let's apply it to a military.
Yeah.
Imagine a partner nation is fighting a violent insurgency. The United States gives this partner nation's military a fleet of advanced armored vehicles and night vision goggles.
So they look super formidable.
Tactically, they are dominant. But their Ministry of Defense has a corrupt, entirely broken payroll system.
Uh-oh.
So the soldiers on the front lines have not been paid in 3 months. Their families back home cannot afford to buy food.
So what does a heavily armed, starving soldier do?
Exactly. They use their weapons to survive. Those soldiers will set up unauthorized checkpoints on the main highways. They will stop civilian vehicles, point their brand new United States-supplied rifles at the local farmers, and extort them for cash just to let them travel to the market.
Wow. And the moment that happens, the population's trust in the government just vaporizes.
Instantly.
The national military is no longer viewed as a protector. They are viewed as a predatory gang.
Yes.
The government loses its functional legitimacy, and the local population starts looking to the insurgents for protection.
Which is exactly the opposite of what the Security Cooperation Program was trying to achieve in the first place.
So the bureaucracy actually matters more than the bullets.
100%. A frontline battalion is entirely useless if the soldiers desert because human resources cannot process a paycheck. It is useless if those armored vehicles break down after 2 weeks because the logisticians do not know how to order spare parts or maintain the engines.
So building a military is fundamentally about building the bureaucratic institutions that sustain that military.
Exactly. If the institutions are rotten, the tactical training is irrelevant.
This brings up a really uncomfortable reality, though. I think a lot of people hearing this are going to recognize a massive, terrifying risk.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
By heavily arming and structurally training partner nations, especially in volatile regions, aren't we just outsourcing our own security interests?
It is a common critique.
Even worse, aren't we taking an enormous gamble that the billions of dollars in high-tech weapons and advanced tactical training might one day be turned against the very population of that country if the government suddenly fractures or a dictator stages a coup?
Duck, it is a profoundly valid concern. You are pointing out the central friction of building foreign militaries.
It seems so risky.
It is. When you create a highly lethal, highly efficient security apparatus in a fragile state, you are creating a tool that can be used for immense good or immense oppression.
Does the doctrine address this?
Yes. The authors of Joint Publication 320 are acutely aware of this. They do not gloss over the risk. The doctrine attempts to put rigorous guardrails on this by making adherence to human rights, the rule of law, and civilian control of the military a legally binding foundational requirement of any security cooperation program.
But how does the doctrine actually enforce that? I mean, is it just a presentation on ethics that they click through at the end of a rifle range day?
No. The mechanism is far more robust than that. Before any training or equipment can be provided, United States law requires rigorous vetting of the specific foreign units receiving the assistance.
What kind of vetting?
Well, if a particular battalion has credible allegations of gross human rights violations like extrajudicial killings or torture, the United States is legally prohibited from providing them with any assistance.
A full stop.
A full stop. Furthermore, institutional capacity building mandates that training must deeply integrate the law of armed conflict, civilian harm mitigation, and the absolute necessity of civilian authorities controlling the military.
So it is baked into the curriculum.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We train their military lawyers, we train their inspectors general to root out corruption.
But let us be brutally honest about the reality on the ground. Vetting is not perfect.
Of course not.
We have seen historical examples where units trained by the United States later participated in coups or committed abuses. The doctrine is the ideal, but the application is incredibly messy.
You absolutely have to acknowledge the messy reality. The doctrine represents risk mitigation, not risk elimination. It is a calculated gamble.
Why take the gamble at all then?
Because the strategic theory behind the doctrine is this. A fragile state with a weak, undisciplined, unprofessional military is almost guaranteed to collapse or become a safe haven for transnational threats.
Which is worse for everyone.
Exactly. That outcome is disastrous for global stability. By engaging through security cooperation, the United States is attempting to shape that force. We're trying to build responsible partners who share mutual security interests.
Trying to guide them in the right direction.
Yes. A professional military that respects its citizens and answers to elected leaders is a stabilizing force. If we completely withdraw from that space out of fear that the weapons might be misused, we leave a vacuum that rival global powers will happily fill.
And those rivals will not be teaching human rights compliance.
No, they certainly will not be teaching civilian harm mitigation.
So the overarching goal of security cooperation is to increase the partner nations' functional legitimacy by transforming their security forces into a source of protection rather than a source of fear.
That is the ideal outcome, yes.
But consider the worst-case scenario, because this bridges us directly into the next doctrinal puzzle.
Okay, let's hear it.
You can spend a decade executing perfect security cooperation. You can build a partner's military into a highly professional, well-supplied, ethically trained force. But if their civilian government completely collapses from internal corruption, or hyperinflation destroys the economy, or a natural disaster wipes out their infrastructure.
And what?
Yeah, that highly trained military is effectively standing in a void. A strong military cannot indefinitely prop up a totally hollow state.
That is a great point.
Yeah.
A military is a shield. It cannot be the foundation of the house.
Right.
If the civilian institutions fail, the military will eventually fracture under the strain of trying to maintain order in a starving, desperate society.
Which brings us to the incredibly delicate, highly complicated art of joint stabilization, pulling from Joint Publication 307.
This is where it gets really interagency.
Exactly. And the very first thing that jumps out from this text is a concept that fundamentally challenges how most people view military deployments. Stabilization is described in the doctrine as an inherently political endeavor, not primarily a military one.
And that distinction is absolutely crucial.
Why is it so important?
Because when the public imagines the military deploying to a destabilized, war-torn country, they picture the generals running the show.
Right. They picture martial law.
Exactly. They picture military commanders making all the decisions about how the society will be rebuilt. But the doctrine clearly states that the Department of State is the lead agency for stabilization efforts abroad.
The diplomats are in charge.
Yes. The Department of Defense is explicitly relegated to a supporting role.
The military is just the backup to the diplomats.
Because stabilization requires aligning all the instruments of national power, diplomatic engagement, foreign financial assistance, economic development, and defense.
It takes a village.
It does. The goal is to create the conditions where locally legitimate authorities can peaceably manage their own conflicts. The military's primary job is to provide the secure environment so that the political, economic, and diplomatic experts can actually do their work without getting shot at.
Let us examine what the military is actually doing in this supporting role, though, because the text outlines 6 joint stability functions.
It does, yes.
And these functions reveal just how deeply the military has to blur the lines between combat operations and civic administration.
They really have to wear a lot of hats. The 6 joint stability functions are security, foreign humanitarian assistance, economic stabilization and infrastructure, rule of law, governance and participation, and finally, security cooperation, which we have already thoroughly covered.
Let us walk through how these play out in reality. The first one, security, seems pretty obvious.
Establishing a safe environment.
Right.
It is the prerequisite for everything else. It involves protecting the civilian population from violence, securing critical infrastructure like power plants and ports, and eliminating hazards like unexploded ordnance or landmines.
Because you cannot rebuild if things are blowing up.
Exactly. You cannot ask a civilian contractor to rebuild a municipal power grid if the work site is constantly taking mortar fire.
Makes total sense. And what about foreign humanitarian assistance? We often see the military taking the lead on this after a massive earthquake or a tsunami.
Right. This function is about relieving acute human suffering. It is providing emergency food, clean water, immediate medical care, and temporary shelter in the immediate aftermath of a crisis.
Why the military, though, and not just charities?
The military is often heavily involved here simply because they possess the massive logistical machinery required to respond globally in hours. The military has the heavy lift cargo planes, the cargo helicopters, and the expeditionary medical units to deliver aid faster than almost any civilian non-governmental organization.
They just have the speed and the gear.
Exactly.
But the next 3 functions, economic stabilization and infrastructure, rule of law, governance and participation, these sound like they belong strictly in the civilian domain.
They do sound like that.
Why is a combat engineer battalion involved in economic stabilization?
Well, ideally they are not. In a perfect stabilization effort, civilian agencies from the Department of State, the United States Agency for International Development, and international organizations handle these functions entirely.
Okay, so what is the catch?
The doctrine acknowledges severe environments. In a highly unstable, active conflict zone, those civilian agencies might not be able to operate safely.
They cannot just walk in.
Right. They simply cannot put unarmed diplomats or civilian engineers into a town controlled by a warlord. So the military might have to temporarily take on those civilian roles to prevent total societal collapse.
Give me a tangible scenario of what that temporary role looks like.
Okay, imagine a city recently liberated from an occupying force. The water treatment plant has been destroyed.
A huge problem.
Under economic stabilization and infrastructure, the military might use its own combat engineers to temporarily repair the municipal water plant to prevent a massive cholera outbreak.
Wow, okay.
Under rule of law, the local police force has completely disintegrated. So military police battalions might have to temporarily establish public order, patrol the streets, and run detention facilities while simultaneously supporting the recruitment and vetting of a new local police force.
And what about governance?
Under governance, civil affairs officers might sit down with surviving local tribal leaders to help them establish basic administrative functions, like a town council, until a legitimate civil authority can hold an election.
It is an incredible balancing act, and I want to introduce a concept from the text here that really crystallizes the difference between what the military is doing and what the civilian agencies are doing.
Okay, lay it on me.
The doctrine highlights the critical difference between the immediate drivers of instability and the root causes of instability. I look at this through a medical analogy.
Oh, I like this. Break down the analogy.
Imagine a critically ill patient is rushed into the emergency room. The immediate drivers of instability, like an active armed insurgency, sectarian violence in the streets, or mass rioting, that is the fever.
Okay, the immediate symptom.
Right. The patient's temperature is 105 degrees. They are actively seizing. The military, in this scenario, is the ice bath and the heavy doses of medication. They have to treat that immediate driver with aggressive security measures right away.
Because if they don't.
If they do not bring the temperature down immediately, the patient is going to die on the table.
So the military suppresses the immediate acute violence.
Exactly. But the fever is just a symptom. It is the body reacting to something deeper. The root causes of the instability, which the text identifies as things like severe economic deprivation, systematic political corruption, or the historical marginalization of a specific minority group. Those root causes are the underlying bacterial infection.
Ah, the real disease.
Exactly. You can give the patient all the ice baths in the world. You can deploy 5 divisions of infantry to lock down the city. But until you administer the antibiotics, the fever is just going to come right back the second you stop the cooling treatments.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. The Department of State, the development agencies, and the host nation's own civil authorities are the doctors who have to administer the antibiotics.
Yes.
The military can apply force to suppress the immediate drive of the violence, but the military cannot cure the underlying political or economic infection. They cannot shoot the corruption out of the host nation's parliament.
That is such a good point.
If the root causes are not aggressively addressed by the civilian agencies, while the military holds the line, the entire stabilization effort will ultimately fail the moment the military eventually withdraws.
So the fundamental challenge for a military commander on the ground is ensuring that their tactical actions, the ice baths, are actually creating the space for the antibiotics to work, rather than just endlessly treating the fever, or worse, making the infection stronger.
And the doctrine attempts to solve this through a process called civil military operations.
What exactly is that?
This is the intricate, deliberate process of aligning every single military action with the overarching political and diplomatic goals of the United States government and the partner nation. It demands that commanders view their operations not just through a lens of lethality, but through a lens of societal impact.
How does that translation from a purely tactical action to a strategic political outcome actually work in the field? Like, give me an example.
Consider an engineering battalion tasked with clearing a major road that has been blocked by debris and improvised explosive devices.
Okay, pretty standard mission.
Tactically, it is a straightforward mission. Move the rubble, fill the craters, neutralize the bombs. But strategically, through the lens of civil military operations, they're doing so much more than paving a road.
How so?
By opening that route, they are restoring a vital supply line for local farmers to get their produce to the regional market, which directly supports economic stabilization.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't have thought of that.
They are creating a safe corridor for Department of State officials to travel to a remote village to meet with local elders, supporting governance and participation.
Right.
They are physically demonstrating to the local population that the host nation government, backed by its partners, is capable of restoring infrastructure. They are actively building that functional legitimacy we talked about earlier.
Every single action has to have a political resonance.
Every single action. The military commander must constantly evaluate second and third order effects. They have to ask, does this tactical decision increase the functional legitimacy of the host nation government, or does it undermine it?
This is where friction arises, though, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because if a military unit is too aggressive in its security patrols, if they kick down doors in the middle of the night, if they alienate the local population, if they inadvertently damage a culturally significant site while pursuing a target, they might be tactically successful.
It might capture the insurgent commander they were looking for.
Right. But strategically, they have failed. By angering the population, they have driven sympathy directly toward the insurgency. They have lowered the government's functional legitimacy. It is an absolute razor's edge.
It requires immense restraint. It requires a deep understanding of local politics, tribal dynamics, and economics. You are asking soldiers trained for intense combat to suddenly act as diplomats, urban planners, and sociologists.
And executing that delicate balance, seamlessly shifting from high-stakes combat to economic awareness and tribal diplomacy, requires a very specific type of operator.
Yes, it does.
You cannot just drop a conventional artillery battalion into a highly sensitive, politically charged region and expect them to naturally navigate the local power structures while simultaneously hunting a terrorist cell.
Conventional forces are the massive hammer of the military. They are designed for large-scale, decisive operations. But in the murky environments of the competition continuum, you often need a scalpel.
Which brings us to our final source, Joint Publication 305, and the specialized units explicitly designed for these gray zones, Special Operations Forces.
The tip of the spear.
Exactly. How does the doctrine define their unique role?
Well, Special Operations Forces are small, highly trained, uniquely organized units equipped to operate in hostile, denied, or diplomatically sensitive environments.
So they go where others cannot.
They're specifically tasked with executing missions that are beyond the capabilities of conventional forces, often characterized by a high degree of physical and political risk. Furthermore, they are trained to operate overtly, clandestinely, or covertly.
If you are hearing this, you've probably seen 100 spy movies where the words covert and clandestine are used interchangeably to just mean secret.
Oh, Hollywood loves to mix those up.
But in military doctrine, mixing those terms up represents a catastrophic strategic failure. We need to define the difference clearly. Overt is obvious, right? They are wearing uniforms, flying the flag, and everyone knows they are operating in the area.
Right. Now, clandestine operations are designed to keep the operation itself a secret from the adversary until it is over.
Give me an example of that.
Think of a hostage rescue deep in enemy territory. The infiltration, the assault, and the exfiltration are completely hidden. But once the hostages are freed and the compound is destroyed, everyone knows who did it. The act was a secret, but the sponsor is known.
While covert operations are about plausible deniability.
Exactly. Covert operations are legally and operationally designed to completely hide the identity of the sponsor.
So no one knows it was us.
Right. The action itself might be visible, like a mysterious explosion at an adversary's weapons facility. But if the operatives are compromised, the United States government can plausibly deny any involvement.
Now, diving into the philosophy of these units, Joint Publication 305 lists several foundational special operations truths.
These are so important.
These are essentially the guiding principles for how the entire community operates. And the very first truth, the bedrock of the doctrine, is humans are more important than hardware.
That is followed closely by the principles that quality is better than quantity, and special operations forces cannot be mass-produced.
I am going to challenge that first truth heavily, actually.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if you look at modern defense budgets, and if you read the headlines about future warfare, it seems like hardware is everything.
It definitely looks that way.
The public constantly sees the military investing hundreds of billions of dollars in stealth bomber programs, hypersonic missiles, autonomous drone swarms, and massive cyber warfare architectures.
Yeah, the shiny new toys.
It often feels like the human element, like spending years giving an operator deep regional expertise, intensive language training, and cultural immersion, is viewed as secondary to simply buying a better piece of technology. How does the doctrine justify that humans are more important when technology dominates the budget?
It is an incredibly fair critique, and it highlights a constant tension between defense procurement and strategic reality. Technology is seductive, right?
Very much so.
But the doctrine holds firm on this truth for a very specific reason related to irregular warfare. Technology is only a tool. It is an enabler.
What do you mean by enabler?
A multi-million-dollar stealth drone can provide high-resolution, real-time imagery of an insurgent compound. It can drop a highly precise, laser-guided munition through a specific window.
It provides overwhelming tactical advantage.
But a drone cannot sit cross-legged on a rug in a village elder's tent, drink tea for 4 hours, and negotiate a local ceasefire between two warring tribes.
That is a great visual.
A satellite floating in orbit cannot understand the historical, centuries-old grievances regarding land rights in a specific valley. Cyber architecture cannot look a partner nation's military commander in the eye and determine if they are trustworthy or if they are secretly selling weapons to the insurgency.
Technology cannot read the room.
Precisely. The human mind is the ultimate platform. The ability to comprehend complex, nuanced cultural dynamics, the emotional intelligence to build genuine trust with a foreign partner, and the cognitive flexibility to adapt to a rapidly changing political situation. Those are the capabilities that actually win the competition for sovereignty.
So the person matters more than the gear.
Always. You can provide a partner nation with the most advanced rifles and communication gear on the planet. But if the Special Operations Forces advisor on the ground does not understand the cultural context of how that partner nation's military operates, if they do not understand the religious or tribal dynamics within the battalion, the training will completely fail.
The gear won't save a bad relationship.
Exactly. Hardware breaks. Technology gets jammed or countered.
Yeah.
But a highly adaptable human operator can think their way out of a completely novel, unpredictable situation.
The human is the weapon system, and the gear is just an accessory.
That is exactly how they view it.
But there is a massive misconception about these operators that the doctrine actively attempts to dispel. We are so conditioned by Hollywood to envision the lone wolf operator.
Oh, Rambo.
Right. We picture a 12-person team dropped deep behind enemy lines in the jungle, completely self-sufficient, surviving on snake meat and executing the mission totally isolated from the rest of the military.
And that lone wolf narrative is entirely fiction. The doctrine includes another foundational truth. Special Operations Forces almost always require conventional forces support.
So they need the rest of the military.
They're fundamentally interdependent.
Let us explore the reality of that logistical footprint. If you have a small team of 12 operators embedded in a remote mountain village trying to advise a local resistance group, what does the actual support architecture look like?
The footprint required to keep those 12 people alive and effective is massive.
Really? For just 12 people?
Oh, absolutely. That small team relies heavily on conventional forces for their intelligence architecture, parsing massive amounts of data from satellites and reconnaissance flights to ensure the team is not walking into an ambush.
Okay, so intel is huge.
They rely on conventional logistics to airdrop specialized supplies, ammunition, and secure communication batteries. If a team member is critically wounded, they rely on conventional medical evacuation helicopters idling 50 miles away.
They need a lifeline.
Exactly. And if the team is suddenly surrounded by an overwhelming enemy force, they rely on conventional air support or artillery to provide massive firepower to break the siege. Special Operations Forces do not operate in a vacuum.
The small team is just the very tip of the spear.
Yes, and the vast shaft of the spear pushing them forward is the conventional military.
Speaking of advising resistance groups, I want to touch on two terms that appear in this doctrine that feel incredibly relevant to modern global events, especially when looking at nations occupied by hostile neighbors.
Okay, which terms?
The terms are unconventional warfare and support to resistance. How do Special Operations Forces apply their unique skills here across the competition continuum?
Well, unconventional warfare is essentially the mirror image of foreign internal defense.
How so?
In foreign internal defense, the United States is helping a legitimate government put down an insurgency. Unconventional warfare is exactly the opposite. It is the activities conducted to enable a resistance movement or an insurgency to coerce, disrupt, or overthrow an occupying power or a hostile government.
So we are the ones helping the rebels. We are training the insurgency.
Yes. And support to resistance is the broader, overarching term for activities that support a population resisting subversion, aggression, or occupation.
That sounds like a perfect job for these specialized units.
It is. Special Operations Forces are uniquely suited for this mission because they are trained to operate deep within the human terrain. They can embed covertly with resistance networks, provide advanced tactical training, coordinate international supply lines to smuggle weapons, and help synchronize the resistance's scattered actions with the broader strategic goals of the United States.
But this is not just about teaching resistance fighters how to build explosives and ambush supply convoys, right?
No, not at all.
If the ultimate goal is the competition for sovereignty, blowing things up does not inherently grant functional legitimacy to the resistance.
Far from it. The doctrine outlines a comprehensive resistance continuum. Kinetic violence is often the last resort.
So where does it start?
A resistance movement typically starts with nonviolent legal actions, protests, and petitions. It escalates to nonviolent illegal actions, like massive labor strikes designed to paralyze the occupying power's economy, or widespread civil disobedience.
And then it gets violent later.
Right. Only later does it escalate to armed rebellion, insurgency, and belligerency.
So what are the Special Operations Forces advisors doing during those nonviolent phases?
They might be advising the resistance network on secure, encrypted communications to avoid detection by the occupier's secret police.
Keeping them safe.
Exactly. They might assist in psychological operations designed to slowly delegitimize the occupying power in the eyes of the global community. And crucially, they assist the resistance in setting up an underground shadow government.
A shadow government?
Yeah, they help the resistance establish clandestine medical clinics, hidden supply chains for food, and shadow courts to settle disputes.
They are helping the resistance build functional legitimacy right under the nose of the occupier.
Exactly. It comes back to the political goal. The objective is not merely to blow up an occupier's tank. The objective is to make the occupation so politically, economically, and administratively painful that the adversary's strategic will breaks.
You just wear them out.
You force the occupier to expend massive amounts of resources just to maintain basic control over the streets. And by building up the shadow government, the resistance ensures that when the occupier finally withdraws, there is a legitimate, capable structure ready to take over, preventing the country from collapsing into total anarchy.
It is about creating an environment where the adversary realizes they cannot possibly win the human terrain.
Exactly.
Let us step back and look at the massive, intricate puzzle we have just put together over this deep dive, because we have covered a tremendous amount of philosophical and tactical ground today.
We have mapped out a complete paradigm shift in how the military views its purpose and its methods in the 21st century.
Let us trace the path of that shift. We started with the realization that the comfortable binary light switch of peace and war is dead.
Completely dead.
We are living in a persistent competition continuum, where state and non-state actors are in a constant grinding competition for sovereignty. The prize is functional legitimacy, the trust of the population earned through governance and security.
And because the United States cannot enforce order everywhere, we rely on the massive bureaucratic apparatus of security cooperation to build a global network of capable allies.
Right, building up our friends.
We use security force assistance and institutional capacity building to ensure those partner nations have functioning ministries, reliable supply chains, and legally compliant forces that respect human rights and answer to civilian control.
But because a strong, heavily armed military cannot save a rotting, corrupt state, we have the doctrine of joint stabilization,
which is largely civilian-led.
We explored the reality that stabilization is an inherently political process, led by civilian diplomats from the Department of State, with the military in a critical supporting role.
The doctors in the ice bath.
Exactly. The military acts as the ice bath to suppress the immediate fever of violence, creating the necessary secure environment for the civilian agencies to administer the antibiotics, curing the root causes of instability, like economic despair and poor governance.
And finally, executing this incredibly complex, politically sensitive strategy requires special operations forces.
The human-centric experts.
Yes. These are the experts who navigate the murky gray zones, build trust with foreign partner nations over tea, and operate deep within the human terrain to organize, advise, and sometimes support resistance networks against hostile occupiers.
It is a totally invisible web of strategy, diplomacy, bureaucracy, and specialized action that is happening every single day all over the world.
It really is.
It is actively shaping the global environment to ensure the United States maintains its strategic edge before the first shot of a conventional war is ever even considered.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative question to consider as we close.
I'm ready for it.
If we connect all of these doctrinal concepts to the bigger picture of the modern world, if the most critical battles for global influence are now being fought below the threshold of armed conflict, if the actual tools of victory are no longer just aircraft carriers and armored divisions, but rather agricultural advisors, military lawyers teaching human rights compliance, logisticians fixing payroll systems, and civil affairs experts negotiating local truces, does the public need to completely redefine what they imagine a war hero looks like?
Oh, wow. That is a profound thought to sit with.
It changes everything.
We are so culturally conditioned to revere the kinetic actions, the dramatic firefights, the daring hostage rescues, the tactical strikes that make for great movies. We want the visible victory.
But maybe the real victories are invisible.
Right. What if the greatest strategic victories of our time are the ones we never hear about? What if the true victory in modern military doctrine is the war that never actually happens? A war avoided precisely because a team of advisors spent 10 years quietly building a partner, nation's institutions, treating the root causes of instability, and fundamentally preventing the fever from ever taking hold.
It challenges everything we think we know about how military success is measured. It suggests that patience and bureaucracy might be more vital than firepower.
It really does. You know, we started this conversation by talking about how we like to view war and peace like a clean binary X-ray, a broken bone that you can clearly point to and say, there is the problem, let's go fix it.
But it is never that simple.
No, it isn't. Exploring this doctrine reveals that the true art of modern global strategy isn't about setting the broken bone. It is about 1,000 invisible, tireless interventions to ensure the bone never breaks in the first place.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this incredibly detailed journey through the competition continuum. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the simple headlines to find the underlying mechanisms, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.